Hi guys, it's me again. I'm taking over my amazing husband's channel to ask some more personal questions or questions that I'm interested to know. And if you guys have anything you want me to ask him that's not related to performance, longevity, and health, you can always comment below and I'll make sure to watch them and try to ask him next time. So today I have a question that's is general and I think it can beneficiate a lot of people. How do you think can someone go about trying to find a mentor?
A mentor?
A mentor. So it can be a mentor, like, I wouldn't say for life because, you know, there's a lot of life coaches and things like that I don't believe in. But I'm talking about either for business or either for academia or, you know, studying or any kind of, you know, thing you're trying to improve in life. It's it's always good to try to find somebody wiser.
Let's think about this. So the purpose of a mentor is two things.
Mm-hmm.
It could be two things. One is to have somebody that you learn from. Basically, this is a person that knows something you don't know,
mm-hmm.
and in the ideal form, lives a life that is similar to the one you want to live in the future. The second reason is for the person to give you advice. Now, the advisory aspect, but let's deal with the first one first before I get into that. I'm skipping ahead. So the first one, in terms of someone having something you want,
mm-hmm.
you can find these kind of people in history books. You can obsess over certain historical figures, even if you don't like everything about them. You can read biographies about them, learn about them, and you can do this in real life. If you have a family who has someone notable, who has a job you want to have, like your friend, you want to be a doctor and your friend's father is a doctor or mother's a doctor, you want to go hang out with them and ask them questions and watch them. The value in this, even though it may seem distant, even if the person is not mentoring you, the
mm-hmm.
value is that as humans, we learn a lot by mimicking. A lot of what we learn is not conscious. If you set your mind to mimicking someone, especially if you're under the age of 20, if you're 18 or 15 or 14, or especially if you're 12, you can mimic parts of their personality intentionally. And this is one of the most valuable ways to learn. Many of the things So for example, say you see somebody that has the life that you want to have. You don't know which elements of his life, of his behavior or her behavior, cause them to have that life. If you mimic the whole thing, you'll get closer to that. And later you can remove elements of it, right? So you could find a mentor like that in person, but the best one you'll find you can't reach in person unless you're born in very useful circumstances, like you're the daughter or son of a ruler of a country and you can just have whoever you want to interact with. But otherwise, you may find them in the history books, you may find them online in interviews, like we were mentioning earlier today, Jordan Peterson, people like that. You can find them and absorb and try to mimic, and even if you're very young, you can even try to mimic how they speak, their speech pattern.
That's actually an interesting point. I grew up staying around people who were 5 to 10 years older than me all the time, and I mimic a lot of their behavior, and that's how people always like, oh, you're more mature for your age. It's like, yeah, because I actually was put in groups where people were always older than me.
Mm.
So even when I moved to the United States, you know, that's how I learned everything that I learned here.
And that's
the internet and copying people.
Yeah. She came to the US not speaking English much at all. That's how people in families see. Remember I talked before about heritage in families.
Mm-hmm.
Only a certain amount of the IQ is genetically heritable, less than 60% or something like, or it was 40% or so. But a remaining part of the IQ seems heritable somehow, but it's not through the DNA directly, not through DNA linkages. It's through the raising of the person, the mimicry that happens without the person even realizing it. Watching how someone holds a glass of water, watching how someone talks to someone else, watching how someone reacts to something. All these things happening subconsciously. So if you can find a way to be around people intentionally, especially, you can do it through books, but especially if you can find someone in real life. So for example, in college you can find this, and at work you can find this. You can identify people. It depends on where you work, but it may be difficult for you to get to someone who is worth imitating to that degree. And it may be also difficult in college too. But along the way, and let's talk about the second part, that direct mentorship process, where someone is guiding you. This happens in work, so very ambitious people in finance and consulting will actually come up to someone directly at work, a senior person, and say, I would like you to mentor me, and they will have a relationship. And I've seen some people have 3 or 4 of these at the same time. They don't know about each other in the same company. But so there you can do that. In academia, this is also a long held tradition, and actually in religion as well, and in yoga and in martial arts. It's in the Chinese martial arts and the Japanese martial arts, as well as in the Hindu religion. They're called gurus. That's where the word guru comes from. So the mentor, teacher. That's a sacred relationship with the student. But in academia, you can find, so in undergrad, usually it'll be difficult for you to access a top professor unless you're very crafty about what you do. Most of them don't teach, so especially undergrads. So you have to like email the person with a very specific question, and you want to come and ask about it and show that you've read all of their stuff beforehand. Come briefly, try to impress them. Because generally academics want to impart knowledge. They just don't have time to teach large crowds of students. But if they see something in you, and what they see in you is not brilliance, but it's rather intention and genuine curiosity and genuine interest.
Determination.
Yeah, determination. If they see that in you, and at least they think you're not slow, they'll be interested in imparting knowledge, and you can slowly get to people that are really gifted, and those people you can really learn from. But if you can't get to them, even in your undergrad, among the undergrad professors, you have professors that are worth learning from, and you can ask them to mentor you, to guide you. You say you want to do a PhD, or even if you want to do something in business and you haven't done your internship yet, you can ask for a mentorship there. And these guys can be helpful because they can point out things to you that are obvious, but you still need to mimic the truly gifted ones.
So how about to do that, because not everybody can access certain people that, I have people I admire, I wish they could mentor me, or like I could contact them and ask them questions, but you can't. So how about joining certain kind of groups as a younger person? Not like as like 25 plus, but let's say between 18 to 25, to try to integrate certain kind of group or societies, that have older people or wiser people that are more accessible to learn from them. What do you think about that?
To be honest with you, I really don't value the mentorship process as much, the formal mentorship process. I had formal mentors that were academics, and they're helpful in telling you, obvious things, but as long as I've had both.
I'm talking about the first kind of mentorship, like where you can mimic people.
Oh, you're thinking about like joining an exclusive society or something like that?
Exactly, when you get closer to somebody, because it's hard to mimic somebody when you see them from far away. You cannot observe them the same way. So that's why I was bringing that up. Not as asking somebody for advice, but like how to mimic someone, or like get into the same, when you're surrounded by people that do the same thing, or like are successful, it's much easier for you to adopt those behaviors.
It may be valuable to join those kind of societies, although I found myself averse to them, because the societies that I looked at, including the Freemasons when I was younger, it depends on the chapter. So some of these societies, social clubs also, not just societies, in Britain there are social clubs, and some of them are societies like I mentioned before, the Freemasons or the Odd Fellows, or in America there are also the Red something. There's a bunch of them. It depends on the area. You have to look at the individual lodge. There are some that have important people and significant people, and people who have done, everybody's important, but I mean people who have accomplished a lot, or who have great drive or something like that. And some don't have many people like that. So there's not that much you can learn. Generally, those people will be people who want to help each other out, and people who want to better their lives. So that's a good thing. But, it depends on the place. I was fortunate in my early life to have exposure to some people who were very gifted and capable, and I learned a lot by watching them. But I also met abroad, actually, some very, very powerful people that were in the Freemasons. So I did meet, there are some still. I mean, because the reason I say this is because historically the Freemasons had a lot of powerful people in them. So you could potentially meet them if you could get to the right lodge. But I'm not aware of any famous people right now that are, but I did personally meet people who were like billionaires kind of things, where they were Freemasons and very believed in that society. So potentially you could meet them. But there are also academic societies. So like there's a lot of Greek letter academic societies, like I think one is Phi Alpha Theta, which is the society connected to the periodical The Historian. But there's other ones. You can join these societies and present papers at conferences and meet a lot of other academics if you're into academia. And well, that's generally it, really. But what I would say is don't underestimate how much you can mimic and learn just from reading even books. Forget about interviews. You can mimic a lot about a person and learn a lot about a person and learn a lot of crucial elements of their psychology, which may be helpful for you in your own future. I mean, for example, to give you an example, one thing that really struck me when in my youth, I read a book about Joseph Stalin by Montfort or Montefiore, called The Young Stalin, which I highly recommend. And in that book, sorry, my eye is bothering me because of finasteride again. But in that book, Stalin was not a hero of mine personally, but he was an extremely capable human being. And it was shocking how much he achieved in his life from such a low beginning, and how rapidly he did it, and without other people knowing, and how strategic and political he was.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not a strategic and political person myself, naturally. You know, I was wear your heart on your sleeve kind of person. So I thought it was interesting to read about him, and I remember one scene in which his son, if I recall correctly, I mean this is like a decade ago I read this book, but his name is Vasily, I think. His son had been abusing his name publicly to get certain rights while he was the head of the USSR. And I realized that, so he discovered that his son was doing this. He confronted his son, actually beat his son up in his house, beat him to the ground. And when he said that, he said, "You are not Stalin, I am not Stalin. Stalin is the person in the newspapers," which was very insightful to me, this anecdote. Because Stalin, the name means man of steel in Russian. And Stalin is a Georgian. He made up this name, and he made up an identity. And he doesn't associate that identity truly with him. It is something he lives up to. It is his Superman, his super version. So it made me realize that some people that accomplish a lot in their life develop an alter identity, that they don't need to internalize it fully. That deep inside they consider it playing an act.
Interesting.
Very insightful, you know. Another insightful thing about Stalin that I've mentioned before in videos is that this fellow was accomplished so much in his life. By the way, he killed more people than anyone else, I think, in known history. I mean, he was really homicidal. I mean, I'm not saying this is a good guy at all, but actually, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. He was generally really not a good guy and did not believe in what he was doing at all. But he wasn't gifted. He managed so much. And one of the insights I learned about how he did that, I learned that this guy, at least he claimed, but whether he did it or not, he claimed to read 400 pages a night while he was the head of the USSR, the largest nation in the world. But whether he read 400 pages a night or not, he definitely spent at least 3 or 4 hours of every evening, all his aides said, in his room at 2 or 3 in the morning reading books. Even during World War II. In World War II, he was sitting reading books about Nadir Shah. Nadir Shah is one of the originators of Persian dynasty in Persia. He was a famous military champion who raised himself from being like a cattle herder into the Shah of Iran. He was reading his military campaigns during World War II, which is so distant and not relevant. But this is the kind of mentality that took to make this man who he became. So you can get these little insights, even in reading. You know, or for example, Stalin, just because we're talking about Stalin, for example, he used to smoke cigarettes. But when he became ruler of the USSR, he realized that it would be more helpful for him to seem fatherly. He wanted to carve out an image of himself being like the protector and father of the USSR. So he started smoking a pipe. But when you smoke a pipe, the tobacco... So anyway, it cut off again, but the point is don't underestimate what you can learn from books and also direct mentorship, but books as well.
Alright, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.